Good evening. We're in the Chiltern Hills, one of my favourite locations in Oxfordshire. I do a lot of photography in the woodlands around here. Sometimes I do some camera trapping for wildlife and that sort of thing in this particular wood. The idea is we're going to do some edits. I did promise that I would do an edit of the Tennessee Smoky Mountains images. Well, certainly one of them, and that will be a forest woodland with some waterfalls and river running below it. So we'll do that at the end. First of all, we're going to shoot off, go and look for a good composition. I'll explain how I find the composition, why I think it looks good and cool and that sort of thing, and hopefully you'll get something from that. And then we'll go off and we'll do the edit in Adobe Lightroom, and I'll show you how I do the editing. Great, let's go. Okay, so we're here in this woodland. We've got some beautiful oaks, beeches, fir trees. There's a whole mixture in here, but it's also got these rhododendron trees as well. And now rhododendrons are sort of like an invasive species, but they look quite good at this time of the year. So the idea behind this composition is we've got the rhododendrons in front to give it that colour, a real little bit of punch, that type of thing. And then we've got this gnarly oak over to this side here, just curving over, and then in the middle we've got a light area where the light's beaming down on the they're sort of like pine trees. I think they're Douglas firs actually. So it's like a real mix of straight lines, curves, and also we've got this sort of like round area of the flowers. So I'm hoping it'll be like a good little composition, and then we'll go back and we'll edit it afterwards. There's a filter on the lens. We're doing about f16, and the shutter speed's down to about 1 second because it's relatively dark in here. Okay, and also the ISO, that's about 400 because I don't want the speed to be any lower than, although there's not much wind, I don't really want it to be much lower than that to stop any movement in the leaves and blurring. So we'll go back and edit this in Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, and see how it comes out. Okay, so here we have the image. It's a raw image. What I've done is, normally it would look like this on your screen, but I've turned it into a thumbnail with a white background, and the reason is that gives you a good overview of what this would look like in the print, and gives you a very good idea of what the lighting will look like in different areas on the print. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reduce this exposure by probably, there you go, 1 point, yeah, a bit too much. Yeah, that's probably alright. 1.3 stop, so that's been reduced down. So I put the radial gradient up to the top right hand side, and this almost is like the sun. So basically what we're doing is we're recreating the sun. Even though we've made this into a very dark image, it shows us the elements within the image. You can see here we've got the much lighter area in the background where the eye is drawn to. We can still see our plants, our rhododendrons in the front, the pink ones, and we can see the light coming from the right hand side as well. So now we draw the radial filter in an extremely long elongated way, just broaden that out like that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to increase the exposure. So it's almost like a vignette. It will essentially be applied to this image. So let's increase the exposure, and we're going to increase it like that quite significantly. There we go. And then when we increase exposure, we always increase the contrast a little bit. It just depends on the image how much you increase the contrast. Now if I go up to the right here, I can press my clippings button, and you can see that there is a slight red area here showing the highlights are clipped in the background. I'm not worrying about that at the moment. It's very slight. I know it's within the parameters of the raw image anyway, and I can bring that back down if I so wish to. Okay, so I'm also going to pull up the highlights a little bit. There we go, just a tad. That's the extreme, but I'm just going to put it up like that. Now a question of whether the shadows need to come up at all. It doesn't really make an awful lot of difference, so I'll leave them like that. and then we can play around with the whites and blacks as much as we want, but I think that we'll just leave them as they are at the moment. Okay, if you wanted to, you could introduce more colour from the colour temperature on the right hand side, but to my mind that's too much, and I think it's got enough as it is at the moment, and we could adjust that later. So let's get rid of the radial gradient, and we'll fit it back onto the screen. Now the rhododendrons to my mind are a little bit too dark, so what we're going to do is we're going to select that area, and the way that we're going to select that is that we are going to go to the colour mixer here, you can see, and we're going to click the colour of our choice, which is obviously the purple. There we go, and that's selected. So now we can come up to that and we can increase the luminance on it. There you go. So that's making them a bit brighter, and if you wanted to, you could play around with the saturation and the likes. The hue changes the colour very slightly, and the saturation, how much it is popping out at you. But I think that's okay. You need to be very careful with the luminance, that you don't overdo it, and we can see how much it has popped there. Let's just zoom in to make sure there's no strange artifacts with that. So no, that looks pretty good. They come out quite nicely. Let's fit that back on the screen. So there you go. You can see the plants, the rhododendrons are there, and they popped out a lot more than they would have done. So that's the before, and that's the after. So what I would do is I would go down to the calibration tool down here, and that tends to be an easier way of dealing with these areas. So the question is whether this is a bit too yellow, and we can alter that. And this is doing it to the extreme one way or the other, and I think that we're going to just make it a tad less yellow, and then just you can change the saturations relatively subtly there, and it's just a question of playing around with the sliders just to get the right feel that you want. Quite often the camera comes out with the best colours anyway, certainly with my Canon, and you don't need to fiddle with these sliders, but I have done here on this occasion because I think this looks slightly nicer and a bit more of a subtle feel to it. So I'm just a little bit concerned that it's a little bit too dark down in the bottom right hand corner here, so I will select I think I'll select a linear gradient. There we go, and we're just going to bring up the shadows a little bit, just put a little bit of detail in there, slightly up on the exposure, but not too much at all. Just gives that little extra detail in those shadows. So that's with it off, and that's with it on. Okay, so the last thing I might come to is come down to the tones curve. I might just boost sort of like the mid-tones a little bit by raising that slightly, and then just coming down slightly, very slightly. It's very subtle toning difference in the darks there and the whites, so we can just turn that on and off. You can see a slight difference. Okay, so that's good. So the next thing we're going to do is just polish it off in Photoshop. Okay, so here's a quick edit of one of my Smoky Mountains images that was taken in Tennessee, the USA, a few weeks ago. So the first thing we're going to do is go to, this is the raw file, we're going to go to Develop Module, we're going to go to the crop tool, and I want to make this a square crop. So I'm going to choose that from the drop down menu, and I think that's probably about right like that. Okay, good. So, oh no, it's not square. That's better. That's much better. There we go. So it's a square crop, making sure that the end of the water comes to about there, so it's still a bit dark there, and we can see it running through on this composition. So we've got this line running through. So compositionally wise, we've got the foreground rocks with a bit of light on it for interest. We've also got this rock in the middle here with the water going around either side. It's a diagonal line, which gives it a dynamic feel, a faster feel, particularly when they're at a 45-degree angle. Those angles make all the difference to give a feel of motion. And we got this beautiful little waterfall in the background here, which is quite a nice feature as well, coming down to join onto the rock. So the rock almost being central to this image, and then we've got the light coming in from the top as well. The image was taken in the evening. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the exposure. I'm going to take this down by about, I don't know, 70. Okay, so it's now very dark, but looking at it as a thumbnail again, we can see the areas of interest, which is up here, the light in the trees, and obviously the rocks and the water down below, and there's a little bit of light here on the rocks in the foreground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a radial filter, and that's going to come down from the top. I'm going to make it really quite feathered and relatively wide, and it's just going to help beam that light down onto the areas that I'm interested in. Raise the exposure quite a bit there, and then a bit of contrast as well. There we go, and then just move it around as I feel fit. Okay, good. I think that's okay, a good basic start. So let's just go to the normal view. There we go. And we can see here the image is okay now, but it's a little bit white here. But we do, so if I was to click on the highlights tab at the top, these give the warning indications of whether it's too dark or too light. You can see that we've got a red spot here, which means the highlights are blown out. But I know from the file it's raw, we still have that detail in here, so we'll get that out back in a minute. I'll show you how to do that. I think in relation to this, I want to alter the color calibration, so I'm going to go right down to the bottom here and just play around with this a little bit. There we go. It's just a question of playing around with the calibration tools, but I think that probably looks a little bit better. Yeah, it gives that a little bit more punch and colour to those greens. So I want to make this area a bit more, give that area a little bit more luminance. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the colour mixer, and I'm going to click in, I don't know, an area that's got sort of a generic bit of colour to it that captures most of the leaves around here. It's a bit fiddly sometimes. There we go. Okay, so that's the colour. So all I'm going to do is lift the luminance. There we go. Can you see it brightening up at the top there? So that sort of just gives that a nice little, don't want to overdo it. There we go. Nice little glow there. So that's good. Let's have a look. I might adjust the saturation a little bit later towards the end. If you see, we can we can change that a little bit if we think it's overdone with the yellows, but so we'll leave it like that for the moment. Okay, so now let's deal with the water. So let's get a brush, and what we're going to do is the whites, sorry, the highlights we're going to reduce, and then we're going to add some clarity as well to that brush. So there we go, quite a bit of clarity. And now we're going to brush on that area. So can you see it starting to come back, and also there being some bit of dynamic-ism, I suppose, and some more lines within those white streaks of water, and you can enhance that here as well a little bit. Can you see? Okay. So that's done. The brush here is a slightly lower flow, and now last of all I'm just going to really reduce that even a little bit more. So if I add the brush again, and then I'm going to select highlights, and I'm actually going to reduce the exposure a little bit, and now I'm going to brush on. Okay. There we go. Now if I zoom in on that, we can see we got some of the detail back in there where we didn't have before. If I was to, can you see that? So we've got the detail back in that water. Okay, so that's good. It's just a question of polishing that off for me in Photoshop. Okay, well I hope you got something out of seeing how I edit my videos. If you're still interested in the woodland photography, how to do compositions and maybe a little bit of editing as well, I've got my book which is called Order in the Chaos, which is an ebook. You can get it on my website, and it just explains how you can go out there and get compositions, how to look for them, and how to take the shot. It might be of use to you, and you can get it off the website. It's relatively cheap. Okay, thanks for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you think this video was any use to you and you want to see some more. Okay, thanks for listening.